Hey everybody, Omar here, your knife of the party guy, and I am back with another fun-filled video for you. And today's discussion, the Benchmade Anthem and knife innovation. That's today's topic. Yeah, knife innovation, not really a lot of that going on in the knife world today. The only other knife innovation that I can think of that changed pretty much how knives open and close would probably be the compression lock. And I think that would be safe to say that that invention was a lot more successful in a sense that you found that even though it was only exclusive to Spyderco, they did put it on quite a lot of knives versus this knife that you're seeing here, which is the Benchmade Anthem. Now, the Benchmade Anthem is an all-integral knife, meaning it's all one piece of metal, as opposed to, say, two halves of titanium melded together into one, and usually there's like a line going down the middle of the knife where you can see the two split halves. That's not the case on this knife. This is just one piece. Now, what makes this knife so interesting and what makes this knife so innovative is that most of you guys are familiar with the access lock that Benchmade came out with. Now, the access lock is completely different than what I have in my hand. The access lock basically runs on what's called an omega spring, which is inside the pivot, I guess you would say the pivot of the knife. It's a little spring, and what the spring does, it allows you to only do one of two things. You can either tighten the knife so that it stays perfectly centered, but the action is not going to be quite as smooth. Or you can loosen the pivot where the action is nice and smooth, but it's got a little bit of blade play, which is what makes this knife so interesting. This knife basically has, and this is probably why they don't make too many knives with this mechanism, and this is the only knife made with this mechanism. The reason is because there's two mechanisms instead of one. Not only do you have the access lock, but on the inside of the knife you also have a coil spring, which adheres to the back of the knife with these two screws. And so basically what they did was they took out the omega spring and they put the spring somewhere else. They put it on the back of the knife, separate. So as you can see, it's kind of adhered to the back of the knife, right? And yet you still have the access lock, but the omega spring that I was talking about, which is usually inside the pivot of the knife, has been removed and replaced with this. So what this does is this actually is what the omega spring should be doing but can't, because it's only one mechanism versus two. So what they did here was they put the coil spring on the back of the knife, and then they removed the omega spring, but they kept the access lock. So you've got this coil spring on the inside of the knife working alongside the very familiar access lock, which allows the knife to open and close like this. So like I said before, on the omega spring, you can either tighten the knife and the action will not be so smooth, but it's going to be perfectly centered, right? Or you can loosen the pivot of the omega spring knife. Maybe it's the Benchmade sequel or whatever knife you might have with the access lock. And it'll have a little bit of blade play. So you have to make a choice. Either on the omega spring, either the action will not be super smooth, right? It'll be a little tight, but there won't be any blade play, and the blade will be perfectly centered. Or you lose the centering, gain the nice smooth action, but then there's going to be like a touch of blade play on the knife. I really think that is probably why this innovation came out. I don't know if they were planning on making a bunch of knives with this mechanism on it and possibly maybe doing away with the Omega spring. It didn't happen because the Omega spring is still around, but guess what? This is no longer around. So basically, what the access lock and the coil spring does is it allows you to have both at the same time. You can have perfect centering, right? And yet the action will be super nice and smooth with zero blade play. Now, if that is the case, what people are probably wondering, well, if that was really the answer, well, then probably why did they not continue on with the coil spring and the access lock working together and do that on other knives? My reasoning, probably cost. When this knife first came out, the price for this knife was $425. Now the price for this knife is $700 now on eBay. People are buying it for that price. And the sad thing is, there is no other knife on the market with this innovation where you have a coil spring and the access lock working together, because it is really beautiful. But yeah, I think we would probably have to say that cost to put these two mechanisms together to create this one knife probably costs a lot of money. Don't forget, there's probably a special machine, right? Because this is a production knife. This is not a custom knife. It's a production knife. So there's probably a special machine that does the coil spring and adheres it to the back of the knife or something. There's probably that machine probably costs too much money to keep running just to make, say, 50 of these knives, or maybe even 100 of these knives out to the public to buy. It probably just wasn't cost efficient, which is too bad, because it's a beautiful, beautiful innovation. One of the things on the knife that kind of sucked, I thought, was the pocket clip. It just didn't, I don't know, man, it didn't work too well. So what I did was I contacted Adam Purvis on Instagram, and he made this really nice Damascus pocket clip for me. I thought it was a much better option, and it gave it a little bit of a pizzazz as well. As you can see, the centering on this knife is dead on. It's just dead on. I'm holding my iPhone in my hand, so I can't show you that there's no blade plate, but this thing is built solid as a rock. Solid as a rock. It's also the perfect size. Really good ergos on this thing. Blade steel is M390. As I said, it's a shame they couldn't continue on with the coil spring and access lock working together on many other knives. I think because the popularity of this knife is so important, they really should consider releasing another knife. Maybe don't make a bunch of them, but keep the access lock and the coil spring innovation on at least one knife a year. One model knife a year would keep people happy. I just think it's a shame that Benchmade has completely dropped this idea and that we won't see this idea ever again, because as good as the access lock is and the Omega spring, it just doesn't compare with the solidity of the mechanism on this knife, where you've got the two working together to create the perfect action. I mean, this thing is basically a gravity knife, right? I mean, if you detract the spring, right? If you detract the spring, it's a gravity knife. There's nothing holding this knife together. I mean, if I were to hold it up, I'm detracting the spring. There's nothing there. It's a gravity knife. The coil spring and the access lock put together allows it not to be a gravity knife. But yeah, and it's a shame, because the Benchmade Anthem is now one of the most sought after knives, production knives out there, and people are paying way, way too much money for this knife. But, you know, again, if you're a knife collector and you really, really want to have a unique production piece, this is the one to go for. I considered myself extremely lucky to have gotten one of these when they were still making the knife. Yeah, because if you can get your hands on this knife, I don't know that I would pay $700 for it, but it is a knife worth having in your knife collection, period. Because you are never ever going to see this innovation ever again, and that's kind of a sad thing. Like I said, the only other innovation that comes close to this is the compression lock that we saw on the Yojimbo 2, and they still have the compression lock on so many knives with Spyderco. It's a beautiful, beautiful locking mechanism. It's actually stronger than your standard lock, the compression lock. So that one actually changed the way knives are made. It's unfortunate that it didn't happen across the globe to other knife companies. It stayed only in Spyderco. I think that's one of the things that knife makers or knife companies need to do is, if there is a new knife innovation that is working for other, for knives, that every company should have access to that innovation, whatever that innovation is. They'll be able to have the right to use it on their knives. And everybody will have a fuller experience, and innovation in the knife world will move forward. I think it's a shame. I guess I lost you guys there for a second. I do believe it's a shame that knife makers can't be more generous that way. Can even consider selling the mechanism for a price to other knife companies so it will be available to them as well. Share the knowledge. That's basically what I'm saying. Share the knowledge. If someone's got a knife innovation, share the knowledge, because it's kind of a shame that we'll never see this mechanism on any other knife ever again. And that's kind of a sad thing. So that's all I wanted to talk about on this, is this knife innovation and the importance of the Benchmade Anthem in the knife world. My own opinion, I think we're probably going to see this again in some form. Maybe someone will reinvent it again in some other fashion or way. I think that it stopped because they couldn't figure out how to create the concept of a perfectly centered blade, solid as a rock, with no blade play, using only one mechanism. And unfortunately, the Omega spring was not able to sustain that, and they had to separate it by creating two different mechanisms to get the action and the centering and the zero blade play to happen on one knife. And I think the reason we don't see it is that it's just too expensive to create in mass production, so that every company out there, everyone has a shot at making or actually experiencing this knife or this action on this knife so everyone will be able to enjoy it. It's kind of a sad thing, and I think that's one of the things that's missing in the knife world, is we need to have more access to more stuff for everyone. This is a hobby that's not going to go away, and innovation is such a big, big part of it, that if we don't start sharing the knowledge and moving forward with knife innovation and having everyone be able to experience possibly everything that the knife world has to offer, well, then that's kind of a sad thing. So I'm going to leave you guys with that thought and the Benchmade Anthem. Again, if you're lucky, maybe you'll run into someone who's willing to sell you their Benchmade Anthem if they're tired of it for $425 when it came out. I mean, you never know. Just got to keep on looking. Mine, unfortunately, guys, is not for sale. I am keeping this one forever. It's a really great knife. It's also the only integral piece that I own in my collection. And as you guys know, I am a South African knife collector, but this is only one of 4 production knives that I own from one of the 4 major knife companies. Those 4 major knife companies are Benchmade, Spyderco, Kershaw, and Zero Tolerance. And I got one knife from each. Trying to let that part of my collection grow a little bit, but I'm having difficulty because the South African bug has really got me. So with that being said, I will talk to you guys later in the next video. It has been fun going live with you guys, even though I only have one person watching me. It does make it easier for me to do videos this way, so I do appreciate you guys watching. And I just want to say hello to my good buddy Josh, who is really a big supporter of my channel and what I do. So I will see you guys in the next video. And again, Benchmade Anthem. If you can get a hold of one of these, don't buy it for $700. But yeah, if you want to get one for $700, go ahead. I won't, you know, I'm not gonna say anything bad about you. But you know, I don't think the knife's worth $700. Something to consider. The Benchmade Anthem, one and only, with the most innovative knife mechanism since the compression lock. Thank you so much for watching. This is Omar, your Knife of the Party guy, signing off. I'll see you guys in the next video. And you guys have a great weekend.